Fenomenal. ¿Se puede escuchar? Sí,
Ahora, ¿no?
ahora nos oyen, sí, ahora sí.
Vale, bueno, seguimos con el programa tan intenso como veis de Fitur Screen y este es otro de los eventos significativos de nuestra ya tercera edición, que es el gusto que nos da deciros que la actriz Emily Blunt, de cuya trayectoria e importancia no tengo nada que decir, ha aceptado ser nuestra embajadora honoraria de Springfield Commission, y ayer tuvimos la ocasión, en pleno casi el set de rodaje que está rodando en España, le entregamos este título. Ella se incorpora a los ya conocidos, que lo hemos dicho varias ocasiones, embajadores nuestros, que al final lo que están haciendo es, con su imagen y con su disposición, decir que les gusta España como destino de rodajes y se convierten en gente que va difundiendo lo que significa nuestro país para la industria, en los que ellos son prescriptores y son gente influyente en todo el mundo.
Sí, aquí si me dejas. Bueno, es una pena que no podamos tener aquí a Emily Blunt. Simplemente está aquí en España, está rodando, está en Castilla-La Mancha, pero está en la burbuja de rodaje de la que no puede salir. Entonces lo que hicimos ayer fue ir a verla. Quedamos con ella a mitad de camino, tuvimos la oportunidad de charlar, está feliz de estar en España rodando, nos enseñó fotos del rodaje, está encantada. La producción es una serie que es un western para Amazon y bueno, pues estaba feliz, está disfrutando como muchísimo y también, bueno, pues nosotros muy contentos porque poder tener personas como ella que son tan relevantes en la industria, apoyando el cine y los rodajes de series y de cine en España en un momento tan complicado, en plena pandemia, pues como os podéis imaginar es un hito para nosotros. Y bueno, pues nada, compartir esa alegría que tenemos.
Sí, bueno, yo creo que esto también nos sirve para visualizar cómo nos ven ya desde fuera y el interés que va causando nuestro país como destino de rodaje, ¿no? Es un gran avance, sí, el que Emily, encantadora por cierto, nos atendiera ayer, sí, ¿no?
Y ahora contamos yo
creo que sí,
lo del tour.
Sí, yo creo que debemos seguir con esta función, perdonar que no dejamos ni un minuto de tranquilidad a nadie, pero estamos aquí por una obligación que es pública y con esa obligación también nosotros nos hemos impuesto no limitarnos a hacer un simple foro de exposición de lo que representa España en esta industria con relación al turismo, sino que hemos dado un paso más. Ya lo presentó ayer Juan Manuel Guimerá con Teresa Ascona, y reitero el discurso o la razón por la cual hemos dado ese paso, que es crear un producto, un proyecto que es dinámico porque irá creciendo a medida que vayan creciendo los rodajes, que es el Grand Tour, el Spain Screen Grand Tour, esa gran ruta por España.
Perdona, Carlos, creo que tenemos un vídeo, no sé si está preparado para poderlo poner, y el logotipo del Grand Tour.
Esto no es Austria. Genial. Esto no es Naboo. Esto no es Rusia. Ni Rocadragón. Ni Pekín. Esto no es Desembarco del Rey. Esto no es Turquía. Esto es España. Productores, realizadores, directores de fotografía. Todos saben que aún en estos tiempos de croma hay lugares que por su luz, su orografía o su historia albergan un misterio que, como un buen vino, marida a la perfección con la magia del cine, cuando éste la sabe captar. España alberga multitud de esos espacios privilegiados por todo el territorio, y la enorme variedad y singularidad de sus paisajes habitan por toda la historia del cine, habiendo contribuido, como una estrella más, a la fascinación que el séptimo arte evoca y que ha cautivado a tantas generaciones. Spain Screen Grand Tour nace como la oportunidad de canalizar la creciente demanda de Grand Tours tematizados alrededor de la gran pantalla, y que movilizó a más de 80 millones de turistas en 2019. La gran relevancia de las producciones que han tenido lugar en nuestro país, sumado al creciente fenómeno fan de sagas y series de televisión, hacen de este momento el idóneo para articular a nivel nacional un nuevo nicho de oferta turística alrededor de las localizaciones y a través de productos e iniciativas experienciales, sostenibles, innovadoras y desestacionalizadoras. España tiene la oportunidad de volver a ser el mejor escenario posible, esta vez de un viaje cinéfilo cuyo protagonista va a ser el visitante y la narrativa, un mágico reencuentro con las secuencias de su memoria. Todo ello en el entorno gastronómico, paisajístico y cultural que complementa el mejor guión vacacional. Spain Screen Grand Tour se presenta como una iniciativa aglutinadora, tanto del espíritu del cine como del espíritu de los Grand Tour. Todo el romanticismo de la aventura, del viaje, de la cultura, del conocimiento, en una experiencia enriquecedora en ruta por el plató cinematográfico más grande del mundo. Spain Screen Grand Tour. Lights, cámara, Spain.
Genial. Bueno, creo que realmente no requiere mucho más explicación un vídeo tan claro, pero sí tengo que dar una justificación de por qué una gente como nosotros, que somos una red pública nacional, territorial, que capta rodajes, nos metemos en estas cosas. Nos metemos porque creemos que la localización es un personaje más. Tenemos que lograr la fidelización de los productores nacionales e internacionales, atraer rodajes, pero también queremos devolver también ese valor añadido al país, que no solamente es ser el sujeto activo de rodaje, sino que también le ofrecemos a la administración pública por una parte y al sector privado por otra la explotación turística de todo este activo cada vez más creciente. La unidad entre las dos industrias, luego veremos el estudio de Netflix que aclarará muchas cosas, la unión de las dos industrias, la sensibilización de la administración pública para que facilite por una parte los rodajes y ponga el esfuerzo en su rentabilización turística, creo que justifica con creces nuestra presencia aquí. El que creáramos hace 3 años este espacio y que llevemos tantos años trabajando sobre este fenómeno del turismo de pantalla, ¿cómo se llama? De modo que, como ya digo, esto es un proyecto que no va a parar nunca, pero del mismo modo que se decía en el siglo XVIII que una ardilla podía recorrer España de árbol en árbol, desde el norte al sur, creo que le podemos decir a los españoles, a los turistas y a los viajeros que pueden recorrer España de norte al sur sin parar en otro sitio que no sea en donde se ha rodado una película o una serie importante de la historia de la cinematografía y del audiovisual. ¿No? Que estamos muy contentos de este proyecto que no ha hecho más que empezar, que se convertirá en un producto, creo que, de gran utilidad para cualquier estrategia turística y audiovisual del futuro en España.
Bueno,
así lo veo yo al menos.
Ya, yo creo que lo vamos a dejar aquí porque ahora enseguida vamos a tener la presentación de un estudio realmente muy relevante que está creando mucha expectación, que ha realizado Netflix con la Organización Mundial del Turismo. Vamos a tener la oportunidad de tener esa presentación y en primicia los resultados del estudio. A continuación habrá una mesa redonda, así que pues os invito a quedaros y bueno, pues me imagino que irán llegando más gente a sumarse al evento. Muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Gracias a vosotros.
Hi. Hello. Stories connect people in moving and profound ways. Movies and TV shows have been capturing audiences for decades, discovering us new worlds, building bridges between cultures. Tourism has a similar effect. That's why we are here today to talk about the connections between tourism and internet entertainment services. We are going to think about the ripple effect that watching content on streaming services has on culture and tourism. But first of all, I would like to give a warm welcome to our audience here in Fitur and there at home. As you know, according to Fitur safety protocols, participation is limited, but you can follow the live stream coverage at Fitur webpage, as well as United Nations World Tourism Organization web and Spanish Film Commission website. Let me ask you a question. Do you know that viewers that watch content for other countries are more likely to travel to such destinations? Netflix and United Nations World Travel Organization have developed a research that confirms this point. We are going to introduce today a remarkable white paper, Cultural Affinity and Screen Tourism, the case of internet entertainment services. And please remember these words, cultural affinity, because it's the cornerstone of this investigation. And most important, the core of cultural affinity lies in a connection of values. United Nations World Travel Organization and Netflix are strongly committed to this goal. Build bridges between communities, create stronger bonds between countries, foster feelings of positivity in people around the world. We are going to delve into the coupling of screen tourism and cultural affinity with our panelists, but first of all, we would like to introduce you this white paper developed by Netflix and UNWTO. The best person to do this is Naomi Gimbrek. She works for DISAL Consulting, and she's one of the authors of this white paper. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Naomi. Please come to the stage. An applause, please, to Naomi. Thank you.
First, I'm going to do some testing. Can you guys hear me? We're good? Awesome. So, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Naomi Gimbrek. I represent DISAL Consulting. We are a boutique firm specializing in strategy and public policy. And we do a lot of work in estimating the impact of disruptive technologies on economies and societies today. And I have the greatest pleasure of presenting to you today our white paper, Cultural Affinity and Screen Tourism, the case of internet entertainment services. This is a partnership between Netflix and the World Tourism Organization. So let's get started. This right here? Sorry, which one? This one? Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. Give us one moment to figure this out. All right. This one? Okay, great. So we're going to do three things today, okay? The first, we're going to talk about how content distribution has evolved over time, impacting tourism, and introducing this concept called cultural affinity through films and TV series, which is something that has never been done before. And we think it can really change the way we holistically see tourism today. Then second, we're going to demonstrate the impact of this new approach through a Netflix case study. And lastly, we'll offer recommendations to policymakers and business leaders on how they can really leverage on film and TV content for a more holistic sector. So we came up with this idea in 2019. And the idea was this: how can we expand the phenomenon known as screen tourism to benefit the tourism sector in a more holistic way? So we took the traditional definition of screen tourism, right? Which is somebody watches a film, they hop on a plane, they spend a couple days at a destination. So we took that definition and expanded it to include this thing called cultural affinity. And what this means in its purest form is a growing level of likening or closeness towards something or someone based on similarities and commonalities. We see cultural affinity a lot in marketing, for instance. It's known as brand affinity. And we also see it in public policy, known as soft power. So once we took cultural affinity and put it together with screen tourism, what we realized is that we now had an audience that developed a fascination and attraction towards the depicted country's culture or the country itself. And this is where the magic happens, because it triggers a ripple effect beyond travel itself. As you can imagine, this brings benefits to the tourism industry, right? So we identified 3 benefits. The first one, it contributes to a more sustainable approach to tourism. The second is widening the economic impact beyond travel itself. And the third is about widening and strengthening connections between communities. So let's take a look at this one by one. When we talk about sustainable tourism, what we mean here is that if you have meaningful connections, right, between a viewer and the depicted country that is on screen, it engenders a vested interest in the destination beyond location sensationalism, right? And so what this does, it can contribute to reducing the seasonality and even increasing the diversification of the destination's offerings, such as its products and attractions. And lastly, it encourages cultural tourism, which we know is a growing facet of tourism today. Secondly, it widens the impact beyond travel itself, right? So if you have an audience that has growing fascination towards the country or culture depicted on screen, then there is a greater opportunity to expand the economic and social impact in the country's different offerings, such as its cultural goods, its lifestyle, its music, its literature preferences, etc. And this can really contribute to building more peaceful societies and developing the economic growth, which is in line with Sustainable Development Goals signed by all UN member states, specifically catering to SDG number 8. And thirdly, it's about widening connections, right? So if you have a positive relationship, if a viewer develops a positive perception towards the depicted country or culture, then this has positive implications on the nation's brand, right? Whether or not that viewer ever travels there. And this at its heart can spread tolerance and understanding between people of different cultures, different communities, which can help build more peaceful societies and raise stakeholder awareness, contributing to SDG 16 and 17. So how do we capture these benefits, right? Well, in order to do that, content needs to have 3 prerequisites. It needs to be diverse, it needs to be easily accessible, and it needs to be high quality. So when we talk about diversity in content, what we mean is, yes, you need 2 things. You need diversity of genres, because that's how you're going to get as many people to watch your film or TV show. But secondly, the more diverse content you have, the greater the opportunity it is to build these cultural connections. And the greater the cultural connections, the greater the benefits. Secondly is, the second prerequisite is ease of access. So audiences need to be able to access content wherever they are in the world, at whatever time, without any language and viewing barriers and accessibility barriers. Lastly, content, because viewers, the caliber of a film or a TV show matters to the viewer, right? And the risk of showing poor quality films and TV is that it gets pushed aside by an uninterested audience, which means you miss out on that opportunity to build those connections in the first place. So now that we understand the prerequisites to content, we then asked ourselves this question, well, how is content being consumed today, right? And this is where the entry of new market players such as internet entertainment services, which are services that provide access to content through the internet. And we recognize they have a global audience base and they can offer diverse and quality content. And we identified 3 motivational drivers for this. And the first one is their unique distribution model. Internet entertainment services, they don't rely where their audiences are geographically in the world, right? If you took a traditional media distribution setting, say a cinema or a broadcasting network in India, would be less inclined to show a Spanish film because the lack of local demand to make it economically viable. Internet entertainment services can show a Spanish film to audiences in India and vice versa because of their global fan base, right? So what happens is then audiences have a wider range of content to choose from, which then results in more people watching and more content being discovered, right? And what this does is then it incentivizes IES players to invest further in such content, help boosting film productions around the world. And this virtuous cycle continues, and it's supported by an economic theory called the long tail effect, which basically means as we move into digital economies, there is a shift from mass markets to serving millions of niches. And secondly, IES have personalization algorithms that connect the viewer to their preferred content, creating new cultural connections where audiences are watching content they would have never been exposed to or never had access to. And thirdly, IES have technology features for the ease of access for audiences. So audiences can watch content on demand wherever they are in the world, and they have subbing and dubbing features which traverse language barriers, and accessibility features such as closed captioning and audio description for audiences with visual or hearing impairments. So now that we establish the theoretical framework behind this, how do we measure this, right? How do we see the impact of cultural affinity through films and TV content? And so now I'm going to walk you through a Netflix case, which is applicable to other internet entertainment services as well. So between 2020 and 2021, Netflix commissioned a series of surveys to really understand the impact on an audience who had easy access to very diverse and high quality content. And what they did was they took titles originating from 5 countries, which was Spain, Canada, Japan, South Africa, and Turkey. And what they did was they took these titles and tested it on audiences outside of these originating countries. And there were 3 very fascinating findings. The first one is this, is that audiences who watch content from other countries or cultures are more likely to travel there, right? So it was really interesting, across all markets, viewers and Netflix users were more likely to travel there, more interested to travel to the featured destinations than non-viewers and non-Netflix users. So what this insight actually tells us is that screen tourism is very much alive today, especially and even through digital and online distribution. And secondly, beyond travel, there was higher interest in the depicted country's broader value chain. So people were showing interest to the food and drink, the history, the language, the people of the depicted country, right? take, for example, this is a caption from the Spain study. And what this means here is that when people watch content from Spain, the interest in the Spanish language was nearly double amongst viewers than non-viewers. And thirdly, because of their global fan base and all those unique features we just talked about, Netflix and similar services have the ability to connect people with content that they've never seen before, creating these new cultural connections. Even so much so where across 7 markets, the average of 47% of viewers said they would have never watched Turkish films or TV series had it not been for Netflix. So what can policymakers and business leaders do today to really capture this potential of film and TV content? And as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a detrimental impact on the tourism industry, with 1 billion and fewer arrivals, trillions of estimated losses, and hundreds of millions of jobs at risk. So in this crisis and times of difficulty and uncertainty, there is a need to build trust, to build dialogue, to build solidarity. And maybe creating these cultural connections is a step in that direction. So we came up with 3 key recommendations. And the first one is to prioritize the diversity, accessibility, and quality of content. But that's because that's how you're really going to capture those benefits, right? Then secondly, if not most importantly, there needs to be greater partnership between public and private sectors. Why? Because even as you saw through the benefits, they cover all areas. They cover cultural, they cover tourism, they cover film. And so there needs to be some kind of ecosystem of synergies, if you will, for this to really work. Then secondly would be to leverage on these community-focused events such as this to really bring to highlight the power of screen tourism. And fourthly, to frame all the strategies and policies in line with sustainable development goals, because that is how you are going to protect the synergies that you create for a holistic sector. And lastly, this white paper is just the tip of the iceberg. We call on policy leaders, industry players, and academia to really help us in asking more questions so we can get more answers to build a more resilient sector for the generations to come. And I'll end with this quote from a very famous show. Today I introduce to you a new approach. So there's no turning back. You've crossed a line and you're stuck on this side now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi Gimbrak, for your words and, most important, for your research. As we have learned, the exposure to Spanish content through Netflix has a great potential to boost tourism to our country. Today, this alliance has a major role not only in the restarting of the economy, but also in promoting a sustainable tourism. I would like to welcome Carlos Rosado, President of the Spanish Film Commission, who's going to talk about screen tourism and the Spanish case. Please, Carlos Rosado, thank you so much. An applause, please.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure for me, as a president of Spain Film Commission, to greet Ambassador Bilku is over here, and the representative of Netflix in this event. We are grateful. First of all, we are grateful to Netflix for participating this year in Fitur Screen. But today's studio presentation is going to have a great deep impact in the future on promotion strategy in Spain for filming and screen tourism industry in our country. It's true, we have been working for several years to aim of attracting filming, expanding the number of locations in Spain, and offering the tourist industry a new resource. But Netflix decision this year to participate in Fitur Screen, and the presentation today, this is very, very interesting studio, really justify our effort. Thank you very much to to decide to be here in Esperanza. Is the next year I attend to your participation and to share the experience in Fitur Screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carlos Rosado. And now it's time to our round table. Let me introduce our guest, Jon Vilku. Serves as the director of the Department of Affiliate Members of United Nations World Travel Organization. He has a deep knowledge of our country and our culture. Mr. Vilku was ambassador for Romania in Spain, Argentina, Chile, and Mexico. His goal is supporting all tourism sector players around the world to join forces and advance towards more sustainability and responsibility. Please, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you so much. Our next guest, Professor Antonia del Rey Reguillo, is one of the best scholars to talk about tourism and audiovisual industry. Professor of Audiovisual Communication and Advertising at the Valencia University. Her research activity focuses on the interactions between Spanish cinema and tourism. She also coordinates the Fitur R&D group, Cinema, Imaginary, and Tourism. Please, Professor Antonia del Rey, come here to the stage. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Esperanza Ibáñez Lozano is since 2019 Director of Public Policy at Netflix for Spain and Portugal. Between 2011 and 2017, she held several positions at Google for Spain and Portugal, and in 2018 she occupied the role of Head Institutional Relations at Amazon Web Services in Iberia. Previously, she worked in the Spanish Senate and the Cabinet of the Minister of Justice. Please, Esperanza. And now we are going to begin, if she let us. Well, first I would like to begin with the Ambassador Jon Vilku. 2020 was a very challenging year for tourism industries globally. Can you tell us about the role of United Nations World Travel Organization on the recovery and how this screen tourism can play a significant role?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to participate in this presentation of our study. And indeed, as is was previously mentioned, and as you all know, 2020 was a very challenging year for the societies, but in particular for the tourism sector. And I will not enter into detail, just to underline the tremendous impact in tourism. I'd mentioned that in 2020, the international arrivals, which is the main indicator to measure the dynamism of the tourism, registered a drop of 74%. This is something unprecedented, and just to have an idea, the impact of the crisis in 2009 means around 4%. So with such a huge impact, as you can imagine, for our organization, it was also a very challenging year. And the main aspect I would like to underline that as a UN specialized agency in tourism, the main challenge of World Tourism Organization was to carry out its leading mission of the sector, and the most important aspect to do everything in our reach in order to foster a coordinated reaction globally to the pandemic, and also as much as possible coordinated restart of the tourism. This is a very important aspect because the key element is to to find the best ways to foster the confidence of the traveler to travel again, and in order to reach this objective, it's important to have not to have a very big dispersion of the measure. But at the very beginning of the crisis, under the pressure of this unprecedented challenge, as we all know, the reaction of the country was very dispersed, so this was the challenge of our organization. We tried from the very beginning to create the framework, the institutional framework for the global coordination, and we did it through Global Tourism Crisis Committee, and within this framework we fostered the collaboration of all the important stakeholders of the tourist sector, that is to say governments, private sector, UN system, and based on these inputs we reached to organize, to elaborate a set of important guidelines for the tourist sector with the objective to help to have a coordinated reaction. Talking about this particular topic of interest, I would like to underline that we know that in the previous years before the crisis, we noted this very important increasing tendency of the screen tourism, of the movie tourism, and of course, inevitably, the COVID-19 crisis put a halt to this growing trend experienced by the screen tourism. However, we are absolutely confident that the tourism will bounce back, and the audiovisual industry, particularly what we call the screen tourism, will play a very important role in this process. Within this context, through this collaboration with Netflix, whose first step is the development of this white paper, the Global Report on Cultural Affinity and Screen Tourism, we have the objective to study more in depth, more precisely measure, and to better understand the segment in tourism, and to go beyond the observation that movies and TV series motivate people to travel. Our main target as organization in doing this is to set the basis that allow us to develop useful recommendations for our members, for the member states, for the private sector, and also for the tourism as a whole. And as it was mentioned in the presentation before, the last chapter of the study is setting a very a preliminary, a first step in this direction, and from this perspective, we consider that this joint work of UNWTO with Netflix in particular, but we are also very interested to expand this collaboration with the private sector, would be a very important first chapter to allow to our organization to put in hands on the table of our member, of the government, of the tourist sector, really useful set of guidelines and recommendations. So this is why I am really satisfied, I am really happy to reach this important day of presenting to you this first study. And I also would like to express my hope that this initial collaboration with Netflix will be very encouraging for other stakeholders from the private sector, because the audiovisual industry is it's very diverse, it's huge, in order to allow us to extend this important network of cooperation and to be in condition in future similar events to put in front of you new and more extended version of this important work.
Thank you, Ambassador. Professor Antonia Reguillo. Professor, you have produced an extensive research about the impact of cinema on tourism. How do you think this will evolve in the next years? Any trends to highlight?
Buenos días, gracias. Agradezco su pregunta, aunque tengo, ya le digo, dificultades para contestarla con exactitud, porque es muy difícil prever lo que va a ser el futuro de la interacción que actualmente, durante la historia del cine en general, pero en las 3 últimas décadas en particular, se ha producido entre el cine y el turismo. Realmente, los investigadores trabajamos sobre datos existentes, es decir, en mi caso, analizar las películas, los personajes, las tramas, la forma en que representan el patrimonio natural y cultural de los diferentes países y el impacto que eso puede causar en los receptores, en los espectadores. Es evidente que la pandemia que estamos viviendo va a suponer un punto de inflexión importantísimo, fuerte, entre lo que es el inmediato pasado y el futuro que está por llegar. Todos los indicadores lo manifiestan así, y todos los días escuchamos voces autorizadas de filósofos, de sociólogos, de científicos, de politólogos incluso, que nos dicen que el modelo de costumbres, la vida social, va a experimentar cambios notables. ¿Qué pasará con respecto a la manera en que tengamos de seguirnos relacionando con los relatos audiovisuales y sobre todo la forma en que vayamos a partir de ellos decidir nuestras opciones turísticas? Eso está por ver, y sobre todo está en manos de lo que es la industria turística, la forma en que va a tener que desarrollar nuevos métodos y nuevas formas de práctica turística para que todo lo que nos preocupa, como es, por ejemplo, la sostenibilidad del planeta y del propio turismo, pues realmente sea una realidad. Dicho esto, hay que considerar que los relatos siempre han acompañado a los seres humanos a lo largo de la historia, primero orales, literarios, y cuando el cine se inventa, pues se convierte en el elemento sustancial de la cultura popular. Es decir, llega a todos los públicos, el cine lo entiende todo el mundo, sobre todo en la época muda, y ahora ya pues contamos con las traducciones, no hay ningún problema en este sentido. Por tanto, yo auguro un futuro espléndido al cine, siempre que ese cine sea buen cine. Las películas que estén bien hechas, con relatos potentes, muy bien contados y que conecten con la vida. Y además que permitan o que susciten en los espectadores reflexiones que les ayuden a conocer mejor el mundo y también a conocerse a sí mismos. Y por otra parte, que cuando las películas muestren la cultura o el patrimonio natural y cultural de otros países, que lo hagan de una manera honesta, es decir, sin acudir al estereotipo, que es lo más fácil del mundo. Los españoles estamos muy acostumbrados a ver nuestra cultura, nuestros espacios y sobre todo nuestras tradiciones maltratadas en las películas, que no se han preocupado con total honestidad de reflejar las cosas como son, y acuden al manido estereotipo que naturalmente eso deforma, eso es una caricatura. Hablo de España porque mi investigación se centra en el cine español y la interacción que mantiene con el turismo, pero esto se podría decir de cualquier país. Todos los que vimos, por ejemplo, Mission Impossible 2, nos quedamos espantados cuando vimos representar en Sevilla procesiones donde aparecían falleras en primer término y después la cruz que conducía los pasos de Semana Santa, que termina siendo quemada como una falla en la noche de San Juan. Todo eso en la misma película y en la ciudad de Sevilla. Si eso no es adulterar la cultura y las tradiciones, pues ¿qué es? Realmente eso no es honesto, ¿verdad? Entonces lo que quiero decir es que el cine tiene unas posibilidades extraordinarias para crear interés en el espectador, despertar su imaginación, su curiosidad y además informarlo sobre el mundo y sobre otras culturas. Y de ahí surge ese imaginario que los espectadores vamos construyendo a partir de lo que vemos y que luego desarrolla en nosotros el deseo por conocer en directo y de primera mano lo que hemos visto en las películas, para contrastarlo y para comprobar realmente cómo son aquellos sitios y revivir la experiencia cinematográfica. De momento me quedo aquí.
Yeah, thank you so much. Of course, we have this desire to discover these places that we have discovered through the screen. Esperanza Ibáñez. Screen tourism, as Professor Antonia Del Rey has explained, has existed for a long time, but we have seen now that global streaming services are having a strong influence. Why do you think that companies such as Netflix are well positioned to amplify the effect that films and TV shows can have on tourism?
Thank you so much, Marta, and first of all, thanks a lot, Ambassador, for the cooperation and for allowing us to participate with you in this research. I think there are basically three elements that we need to consider when talking about the role that services like us can play. No? Some of them has been already highlighted in the presentation, but I would say in our specific case, in the case of Netflix, first, the most important thing is that we really want to showcase the best stories that we can find all over the world. So those best stories can come from anywhere and are being watched everywhere. So I was talking yesterday, about this, that feeling that I had to travel to places like New York. Why did I wanted to go to New York when I never visited New York before? It was basically because I was seeing New York once and again in the screens, and I really wanted to go there and feel what New York was offering to those who were watching New York through the screens. So I think best stories is the best element that we need to consider. Second element, which is key in services like us, is that, for example, Netflix, we have presence in 190 countries. We have over 2 million members of Netflix. That means that local content, local productions are being watched all over the world by any single person that has access to Netflix. I think that's really important because, as the professor was saying before, you watch, in our case, for example, since we started here in Spain, we have released 50 titles, and we have participated in 70 cinematographic productions. All that content is available in our service and is accessible by anyone everywhere. So I think that's the second element, which is important, the reach that services like us have as global services. And the third element, which is also super important, or very important, is basically the fact of making it accessible. So one is, it has to do with a piece of innovation and how those content are accessible to people that don't necessarily speak Spanish, but by the use of subtitles, dubs, etc., can access the content that is being produced in countries like us or like ours. And also, I mean, innovation in the formats, innovation in the ways you interact with the public to bring closer our content to those people. So I think it's a combination of all the different facts that make our services well positioned in combining audiovisual and the willing to come to visit the different places.
Thank you, Esperanza. We don't have as much time as we decide, but I have more questions for you, so I'm going to ask you to be brief, please. Ambassador, as we have learned with Naomi, United Nations World Tourist Organization at Netflix came up with this idea in 2019. I mean, it was an idea that came up before COVID. Why the United Nations World Travel Organization decided to work on this line on action, the huge potential of Netflix and its productions on tourism?
Yeah, actually, tourism and movie industry, tourism and audiovisual industry is quite a priority topic for UNWTO. And in order to explain it, let me mention that this have a lot to do with particularity, institutional particularity of our organization. We are the only UN agency having as members not only the member states, not only the government, but also the private sector. Actually, I have the honor to be the director of the department precisely in charge with the relation with the affiliate members. We have more than 500 companies all over the world with a very diverse profile. And as you can imagine, this is a golden input for us because every day we receive a lot of fresh ideas, projects and proposals concerning all the sectors of the tourism. And few years ago, the trigger was precisely a proposal of one of our affiliate members having to do with the Sustainable Development Goals. For us, it's important to do everything within our reach in order to promote and to foster the 2030 agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals. And at the same time, the huge audience of the audiovisual industry, it's very important for us to deliver our messages concerning the Sustainable Development Goals. So we decided to look for synergies, for win-win alliances on these topics, and we started more than 3 years ago with the collaboration with one of our affiliate members being in charge with the organization of the Ibero-American Movie Industry Gala Awards, Latino Awards, and we decided to cooperate. UNWTO decided to be involved. We put the name of the Gala Award, 17 awards, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. All the famous actors and the VIPs invited to deliver to hand over the awards also mention a message concerning one Sustainable Development Goal, and we had a very positive experience to see the impact in terms of visibility of promotion of SDGs. This was the very first step, and then we decided to extend our network among the audiovisual industry stakeholders in order to deepen this cooperation. And this study with Netflix is a very important new step, additional step in this direction. But to answer your question, the trigger was this quality input that we received from the private sector and particularly from this industry, important industry. And we, as a specialized organization, we are very happy to take advantage of this input and to implement it.
Thank you so much. Professor, we don't have much time, but I have another question because now we have a new kind of tourists, travelers who no longer go understands in seasign tours. I mean, they seek for a deeper experience of the countries that they visit, that they have discovered through the screen. What do you think about that?
Sí, ciertamente existen, podríamos considerar que existen como dos tipos de personas que acuden al cine, dos tipos de espectadores. Uno que podríamos denominar el tipo genérico, que es aquel que acude al cine cuando dispone de tiempo libre y quiere realmente pues distraerse, no tiene un especial interés en reflexionar después sobre la película, pero sí es cierto que si ve una buena película, como hace siempre el buen cine, va a guardar esas imágenes en su memoria de manera inconsciente. De modo que si ha visto pues una ciudad, unos paisajes, unas situaciones que le han conmovido, que le han gustado, le han interesado, eso va a mantenerse ahí latente en su imaginario y en un momento determinado, cuando él las recuerde o si piensa en hacer un viaje o tener unas vacaciones, va a recordar esas imágenes. Probablemente ya ha olvidado el título de la película, pero sabe que le gustaría ir allí porque lo ha visto y le ha parecido interesante conocer aquel lugar, aquel país, aquellas costumbres. Este sería el espectador común y quizá el más numeroso, no sabemos, no hay estudios serios sobre esto. Y luego estaría el otro tipo de espectador, que es aquel que llamamos cinéfilo, que va al cine con mucha frecuencia, que conoce los nombres de los directores, conoce los nombres de los actores, se aprende los títulos de las películas e incluso tiene su propia mitología cinematográfica ya configurada de acuerdo con sus gustos. Este espectador está educado, está interesado por el cine y, por supuesto, también practica el turismo cinematográfico, que consiste exactamente en visitar los lugares que vio en las películas, pero ya por un interés individual, por conocer aquello, revivir la historia, contrastar lo que vio con respecto a la realidad que observa cuando viaja a ese sitio. Esto se puede hacer de manera individual o se puede hacer por la vía de acudir a aquellas compañías o aquellos sitios, promociones turísticas que organizan incluso los propios ayuntamientos, las comunidades, a través de las rutas de cine, que se están desarrollando muchísimo en todo el mundo, pero especialmente en España. Ya no hay comunidad autónoma o lugar que no tenga su propia ruta de cine que enseñar, siempre y cuando se hayan rodado películas importantes en esos espacios. De esta manera, evidentemente, pues el turismo cinematográfico, que se está desarrollando mucho en las últimas décadas, y yo le auguro un gran futuro, aunque me da miedo hablar del futuro porque es difícil aventurar cómo va a ser, pero me parece que es una buena manera de poder gestionar el turismo cinematográfico controlándolo suficientemente bien para que sea un turismo sostenible. Por otra parte, en este sentido quiero decir que es muy buena la iniciativa de las grandes empresas, como es el caso de Netflix, que difunden contenidos audiovisuales de entretenimiento, como pueden ser los relatos audiovisuales en general, el cine en particular, y que están apoyando a jóvenes directores o buenos directores, digamos, de diferentes países para financiar sus películas y que puedan contar historias, ellos que parten de una cultura determinada que supuestamente aman y conocen bien, y esto hace que las películas sean quizá más auténticas, en el sentido del que yo hablaba antes en mi primera intervención, que sean más honestas porque los relatos que muestran tienen mayor verosimilitud, están en concordancia mayor con la realidad cultural y el respeto a esa cultura de la que el director parte. Esto nos beneficia a todos, porque si esos relatos hechos por cineastas del propio país revierten o llegan a todo el mundo con una, digamos, amplitud tan enorme como tienen estas plataformas a través de lo que son pues los medios de contratar películas a la carta, como hacemos todos ahora, ¿no?, que nos propician estos sistemas, o simplemente proyectándolas en las salas de cine de todo el mundo. En cualquier caso, aquí veo un futuro alentador, porque yo pienso que esta tendencia sí se puede mantener, pero siempre y cuando, vuelvo a insistir, que las películas sean de calidad. ¿Y esto por qué? Porque el público cinéfilo está aumentando mucho y el público tiene cada vez mayor formación cinematográfica. Hay que tener en cuenta que los medios de comunicación, la prensa, la radio, la televisión, cada vez más incluyen en sus programas secciones dedicadas al cine, donde analizan las películas, donde presentan a los actores, elaboran coloquios sobre ellas, y esto informa a los espectadores y aumenta su cultura cinematográfica, de tal manera que cada vez van a ser más exigentes cuando vean un relato cinematográfico, sea seriado o sea en forma de cine. Y por tanto, los productores y las plataformas productoras deben tomarse muy en serio hacer buen cine. Si hacen buen cine, crearán un imaginario potente en los espectadores y, por supuesto, el deseo de conocer los lugares, con lo cual revierte muy positivamente en la industria turística y revertirá muy positivamente en la industria cinematográfica. Y además, como ustedes han dicho, pues realmente contribuirán al mejor conocimiento entre los países, al mejor entendimiento entre los seres humanos y a lo que todos queremos, ¿no?, a que el mundo sea cada vez más integrador y funcione mejor.
That's true. I have one last question for Esperanza Ibáñez. As you mentioned before, the study showed that audiences are not only interested in traveling, but also show a higher fascination for local cultures. I was thinking about when you go to America or to Europe 10 years ago, people used to ask you about Real Madrid. Now they ask about Money Heist, La Casa de Papel, or Elite. And this fact is happening now.
No, totalmente, Marta, y muchas gracias, profesora. Estoy totalmente de acuerdo con usted cuando habla de la importancia de potenciar ese talento local, de trabajar de la mano con el talento local. Nosotros lo vemos, y ayer lo comentábamos, aunque tengamos presencia física aquí en Madrid, porque tenemos los estudios en Tres Cantos, estamos produciendo por toda España. De hecho, hemos trabajado con 35 productoras diferentes que han dado voz a muchísimos creadores y hemos rodado en 8 comunidades autónomas diferentes, incluyendo pues, distintos puntos, como decía, de la geografía española. Y cuando hablaba de las buenas historias, esas buenas historias precisamente lo que hacen es transmitir esa cultura, esa realidad local, de una forma que solo el creador que está pegado, ¿no?, más al territorio es capaz de contar. Con lo cual totalmente de acuerdo, y ahí totalmente de acuerdo en que la calidad de las películas, la calidad de las series, de los documentales, es algo fundamental para que verdaderamente se sienta como buenas historias, para que la gente pueda verlo, porque además cada vez hay más competencia, cada vez hay más producción de contenido, que yo creo que es algo absolutamente positivo, pero esa calidad va aparejada tanto de ese talento como de una financiación importante para que verdaderamente las cosas tengan pues eso, la calidad que se busca, ¿no? En cuanto a, perdona Marta, pero me ha parecido muy interesante, en cuanto a la afinidad cultural, ¿no?, básicamente que los contenidos que se proyectan a través de las pantallas crean en esas personas que están viendo, ¿no?, las ciudades o los territorios reflejados en sus teléfonos, en sus ordenadores, en sus televisiones. Si algo constata el estudio y se compartía antes, ¿no?, es precisamente la relación a largo plazo que se crea con los países que se disfrutan, ¿no?, a través de esos contenidos. Y esa relación a largo plazo con el país obviamente tiene unas repercusiones desde el punto de vista económico porque se traduce en el consumo de bienes y servicios de ese país, como hemos visto en la presentación, pero se traduce también en un interés hacia las diferentes manifestaciones culturales del país, y ayer lo hablábamos también, como pueden ser las tradiciones, como pueden ser los monumentos, como pueden ser los lugares, ¿no?, que visitar, como pueden ser el deporte, como puede ser la moda. En definitiva, creo que el impacto, ¿no?, que el contenido hecho en los determinados países genera mucho más allá de lo que son las propias producciones es muy considerable. Y nosotros lo hemos visto en la exposición que tenemos aquí, hay algunos datos que reflejan esa realidad, como aquellas personas que han visto contenido hecho en España, en primer lugar, se sienten mucho más atraídos a la hora de viajar a nuestro país, y en segundo lugar se sienten muchísimo más interesados en conocer, pues eso, nuestra lengua, nuestra gastronomía y pues esas manifestaciones culturales que hacen única España, como pueden hacer único también otros países que la gente tiene interés en conocer porque los conoce a través de sus pantallas. Lo que me parece verdaderamente interesante es que se ahonde en el estudio de todas estas cuestiones y que entre todos verdaderamente podamos sacar el máximo provecho y contribuir primero a revertir la situación tan difícil que estamos viviendo en estos momentos, que como bien decía profesora y como bien señalaba el embajador, veremos un poco cómo evoluciona, y segundo, que como decía, que el impacto, ¿no?, de la producción no se limite únicamente a lo que es la producción, que es considerable, sino que revierta en esos territorios también que están acogiendo todos estos rodajes, ¿no?
I think that's the point. So thank you so much, Esperanza Ibáñez, Ambassador Ion Vilcu, Professor Antonia Rey Reguillo, for being here today. Thank you so much to Carlos Rosado from the Spanish Film Commission. And of course, thank you to Naomi Gimrek for this research that I think is remarkable. You will have the white paper available in a couple of weeks. But now we have this glimpse about the connections between tourism, screen tourism, and Netflix. Because I think that when we watch our favorite shows through Netflix, we dream. And when we dream, we desire to travel. So let's our dreams come true. Travel and watch Netflix. And thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias, Mar.